Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I'm your host, Gabriel Cardona, and don't worry, everything is fine. Everything is fine on my end. I'm coming to you from San Francisco this week. I hope that you're doing absolutely amazing. I am joined, as always, by my amazing co-host, the man with the most cats in crypto, Mr. Connor Daly. What is up, my friend?
Not much, Gabriel. Excited to be here. Happy to be here another week, another good Subnet Show episode.
Nice shirt, looking fresh.
Yes, one of the many bootleg. I think this one might have come from Amazon.
Yeah, that one's looking good. Sometimes the bootleg ones look bootleg, but that one looks legit.
The logo is a little off. It's definitely not the official logo. I don't know who just kind of photoshopped their own random Avox logo. Like, we have brand assets if you Google them. If you're ever interested in using the official token logo or any of the Avalanche things, we have a press media kit. So if you ever need the real high quality assets, you can grab them.
Whenever I was in, I'm going to see if I can open it up here. Whenever I was in at the, is it going to be too hard to find? Here it is. I don't know if you can tell, but I got the sheet that went over the table at the hackathon, the Graph Day hackathon in San Francisco. And somebody with absolute eagle eyes walked up and was like, "Hey, is the logo backwards?" I guess it's, if you look at yours, the little triangles on the bottom right or whatever it is, and this one's backwards. I didn't notice it myself, but some absolute eagle-eyed block star came over and was like, "Hey man, that's pretty sweet, but isn't the logo backwards?" I'm like, "I'm not sure," but I ended up with the actual.
It just makes it more valuable. It's the misprint.
It's a one-off, yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving forward, we are joined today by, well, I guess I should step back. So one of the very exciting things that's happening recently in crypto is this explosion of GameFi, where basically gaming, decentralized gaming and blockchain. And I have been, on record more than once saying that this gaming could very well be the killer app for crypto. So, every time there's kind of like a new platform which emerges, the question is always, what is the killer app? What is the app that's going to make things go viral and hit the network effect needed to tip and go mainstream? And we're always looking for it. And of course, crypto is a multifaceted jewel. So some people might say, well, peer-to-peer electronic cash is the obvious killer app. It's what tipped with Bitcoin. Or some people may say DeFi, that's what tipped with, Ethereum and blockchain 2.0. But one thing is that gaming is just so huge. I know during COVID, for the first time ever, esports or, electronic gaming was bigger than, official gaming. Obviously, most of the world was shut down during that time, but that's just a trend that's going to continue. And I myself grew up gaming like crazy. That was actually my introduction to really computers, and computation wasn't really a personal computer. It was, a Nintendo. That was the computer I was running when I was a kid. And now my son, I have a 13-year-old son, and he is an absolute gamer. Him and his friends love it, love it, love it. So, this idea of amplifying gaming with blockchain components, or moving certain parts of the of gaming into the blockchain, is obviously something that I think is very, very cool. And I think that's going to be one of the killer apps. And so today we're very fortunate to be joined by the project lead at Hatchy Pocket, Saul Omayoglu. Hopefully I pronounced that somewhat close. He's joining us. How are you doing, Saul?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me, guys. Honestly, it's an honor to be here on the show.
Thanks for joining us. He's waking up early. He's in the future. We're still in the past in the United States. He's in the future on the other side of the world. So we're very grateful to be able to line up the times here. So I think people who are familiar with the show kind of know the general lay of the land. We usually go with crypto vision and crypto journey, and then talk about the different projects. So I guess maybe before we kind of drill down on Hatchy Pocket, which I suspect there is a lot we can talk about there, let's kind of just get a super high level of your crypto journey. How and when did you first find out about crypto?
Yeah, right on. Yeah, honestly, that question takes me back. And I think, like many people, I had a couple kind of like superficial interactions where someone comes to you and they're like, "Hey, there's this new thing." And then you immediately have an opinion, and generally pretty dismissive, because it's very big. It's like immediate, like, "Hey, there's this tiny thing that you've never heard of, and it's going to change the world." So you're like, "Yeah, well, probably not." And many years later, I kind of had another similar interaction. When I was in high school, they were going through there was like a phase of like prepping and stuff, and the people were kind of going dark into the really like end days religious stuff. It's a very weird place to start from, but I'd actually always seen there was that documentary, The Zeitgeist, it's like a money documentary, and they talk about just the banking system and how fractional reserve banking and that kind of stuff works. And I was always super fascinated with like the philosophical stuff, just like the reasons for doing things, the reason for behaving a certain way. How does government work? How come this guy's the leader? That kind of stuff. So initially, when I saw it, I thought to myself, like, Bitcoin probably doesn't have much of a chance, and I'm sure they'll find one way to stop it. It's just no understanding of what it is, just the kind of blanket feeling of, if that's what they're really trying to do, good luck to them, because money system versus any other system, we're probably going to end up with money. And then I think it was around 2017 when it was starting to kind of come back into the mainstream. It had already proven itself over a couple different cycles, and I just couldn't believe it was still alive. And I had a lot of time on my hands. I was working as an indie dev and did a deep dive. And I think like 2 weeks later, I came out of my rabbit hole, just like evangelical Bitcoiner. And since then, I've been pretty active in blockchain. So I'm actually going on to my 4th or 5th year now. Time goes so fast. I was around for it was the crypto anarchists that were promoting Bitcoin and cryptocurrency blockchain. There was a lot of really heavy focus on communities and governance. And I kind of see this one as a slightly different phase where it's, I don't know, we call them degens, but it's similar push, like philosophical, where they're thinking of communities and governance and stuff, but now NFTs have taken it. So I've had an interest in chain for a while, and especially when it comes to behavior and cooperation and communities and stuff. And because we also specialize in games, it seemed like a good fit for us to kind of generate the Hatchy Pocket idea and to move in that direction. So yeah, it's been a long journey and a weird one. I wouldn't have mapped it out initially, but we kind of ended up like that. So it's been a while and interesting to see what's happening with crypto. I still feel like we're early in our infancy, you know. Like you said, we're still waiting for I think the killer apps kind of framework is there, but we're still waiting for the actual iteration, like the product iteration, which one's going to take over.
So for those who don't know, can you give us an intro to Hatchy Pocket?
Yeah. Hatchy Pocket actually is a real attempt at the killer app for crypto. Gaming is one thing, but crypto also has some, I guess, like strong potential in terms of governance, cooperation, people working together, especially without having to outline every small instruction or every small kind of objective. I see it as like a real potential to set a base framework and then to work off that. There's actually 2 layers or 2 big layers, I should say, to the Hatchy Pocket. I call it an iceberg, but we have our greater ambition and the current iteration. So what we're looking at right now is actually the Hatchy Pocket initial website, which the very first iteration of Hatchy Pocket is actually just a digital collection. So very old school, just like those capsule vending machines where you go in, you put $1 and you get one out of a collection. So we've got 40 monsters, and you pretty much have a 1 in 40 chance to get any specific monster, and a 1 in 40 chance to get a shiny version. So the gold card you can see behind some of these guys, those are the shiny versions. And there's a special unique guy who only exists as a shiny. So there's very few of him. So collections are actually, it's kind of an entertainment product, but they also used to work as a kind of de facto currency. Especially in times of inflation, you'd always see a kind of like collectibles also kind of make a resurgence. So the first ever collectibles were actually cigarette cards. You buy a packet of cigarettes and you get like a baseball card or a flower or a old school like supermodel in like a bikini or something. And these kind of became like collectibles. And as you came into different phases, they kind of became currencies and stuff. So what we were aiming for with the initial Hatchy Pocket product was basically to have monster IP as something that people would chase and get familiar with. And the first version that we released is what we're looking at now, the Hatchy Pocket collectible cards. So there was a couple of reasons we did it this way. One of them was to get people familiar with the monsters themselves and try to create like an association layer. So they don't call them just, card number 415, but they call it by their name. And another one was actually kind of defensive, just to make sure we're not a security. We have a kind of very unrelated product. We're not making any promises. We're just like, hey, this is a collection of cards and you can get into it if you like to. As a fundamental collectible, there's a lot of extras in this that come only with blockchain, which is stuff like being able to verify how many of this card exists. It's like a thing where right now you could see Pokemon cards, for example. No one knows how many Charizards exist. You could actually go right now, maybe there's a box somewhere of just like thousands of Charizards. It's a possibility. Whereas on chain, we don't really have that kind of thing. And then anyway, the deeper layer, once you're able to kind of verify how many sets they have and stuff. So we only have 1,000 sets, and we've kind of messed with our logic in a way that promotes certain types of behavior. So one of the big things in our world is having all of the grass monsters, all of the water monsters, or every monster. So we call these elemental sets or the full collection. And based on these, we'll have different things happening, which kind of brings us to our next point. Based on your collection progress, we're releasing staking very soon. And based on your collection progress, you'll receive different amounts, different weights for staking. And the currency that you're actually receiving, we don't sell it. We only give it out to people that own the collection. The currency you'll be receiving will actually be the DAO token that owns this brand. So the brand itself will be tokenized. The ownership of the brand will be tokenized. And essentially the community that grows the brand will be the owners of the brand. So if you think back to like playground rules where, you have this card that I need, you have a duplicate, and I have a duplicate of a card you need. It's an asymmetric, but similar value trade. It's one that we're both happy to make, especially when the incentives are aligned, where you know that you're accessing a greater bonus, and I know I'm accessing a greater bonus. You kind of move a little bit away from the exact aesthetic of that monster more to your objective, which is getting the higher bonus. And like this, we also kind of qualify our users to be the ones that are most interested in what we're doing, and we foster our tokens to them, and they get ownership of the brand. We have a few small rules, like anyone can use the brand. After a certain amount, they pay a tax to the brand. They don't need to own the specific NFT. They're just similar to, you won't own Marvel, but you might be able to contract in with them to use part of their IP on a specific platform and stuff. And ultimately, we'd like to be a decentralized open source IP that anyone can use. Basically a elemental monster IP, similar to Digimon or Pokemon, that anyone can use in the development of their games. We've got a new website. I should have probably linked you guys to do a bit of a preview.
If you put it here in chat, I can bring it up. If you want to dump it in the chat here, I'll bring it up while you talk.
Yeah, let me get that now. There's a few things we're doing now, just because we weren't sure how things will get received. How do I do a chat here? We weren't sure how it'll get received, and we don't have our strength is not marketing. Where our strength is kind of like product development, and we've noticed over the last year that we're not really satisfying people with the effectiveness of our marketing. So normally we do like feature-based marketing, and that's part of the reason why we've delayed a little bit. But this is essentially the new website. We'll have a new collection coming out, some extra details on how the DAO works, and all of the features for being able to stake, get your currencies, kind of arbitrate over the brand. We've got places where you can download the assets or add assets in. We're hoping to make, essentially, it's a kind of like compartmentalized business model into the token itself. So we try to do everything in a decentralized way. Adding assets to the asset library happens, essentially, it's like an artist or like a decentralized artist for the company can put up an asset and the community can pay for it, almost like the purchasing or the accounts department of a company. And then on the other end, you've got any devs from anywhere in the world. So normally they would be using the Unity Asset Store or the Unreal Engine Asset Store. It's very hard to find consistent assets, like assets that all work in a single world. You could imagine you can get two friends that are good drawers, and once they try to draw something, or they can draw you two good drawings each, but they don't fit into the same world. One's got like different details, different line work. So art direction becomes more of an issue going into the future where stock photos are available. And with ours, we kind of set the base framework and we try to do things like the branding assets and stuff, so we don't end up in similar situations to some of the people that are like just live tracing your logos. And yeah, we basically try to make every interaction that would belong in a game company or an IP onto the chain. And this is really what we're aiming for with Hatchy Pocket. We want to one day be the decentralized version of Pokemon or Digimon. We sometimes say to people like, imagine anyone could use the Pokemon or Digimon brand at any time. So the guy that wants to make a t-shirt, it's not a bootleg t-shirt. This is part of the community, it's part of the company. It brings value back to the community because they're creating basically a billboard that people will wear and take around with them. Or if they make a game, any one of those games could be the differentiating game that kind of puts us out into the public eye. And honestly, I totally agree with your idea about gaming before. I didn't know about the esports taking over, but one thing that I do remember seeing pretty recently, and I sometimes keep up with this more before, but there was, last time I checked, it was 5 billion smartphone users. And gaming had become the #1 entertainment source in the world, basically. It had beaten movies and, I mean, I don't even know if the rest are up there, but TV and movies is pretty much the last milestone was beating movies, and that's where we are now. So yeah.
So
we're expanding
I want to jump
soon.
in here. So I mean, I think you've said some really interesting stuff, but yeah, the last part, I mean, definitely, caught my attention because I am a person who has at least one very good pitch for Pokemon, but it's they haven't been returning my calls. I'm not sure, like they must have given me the wrong number. I don't know what's happening there. But yeah, I mean, I love this idea of kind of being like Disney DAO or Pokemon DAO, essentially, where you're creating this framework for shared ownership of IP and being able to basically institutionalize fan fiction almost, but make allow people who are interested in these things who normally they would be entirely unattainable. I mean, like, who can legitimately work with the Pokemon license? There's probably
yeah, it's super
AAA
hard.
game studio. I mean, maybe a couple AAA game studios, some movie studios in Hollywood who are incredibly well funded. Like, if Disney wanted to work with Pokemon, they probably could. But beyond that, for the smaller, the shrimps among us, which is, I mean, really everybody. I mean, these are unattainable dreams. So it's really cool that you're creating a template, because even if it's not Hatchy Pocket, I mean, you're definitely just pushing the boundary of what is possible for shared community ownership. And I gotta say, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. And yeah, exactly spot on. Like, I used to work in a pretty big, it was an outsourcing company, but we used to, it was a pretty big one. They had, when I was when I was leaving because of coronavirus, unfortunately. But it was before remote work anyway. It's a random thread, but we roughly had I think at that time it was 300 people working in the studio. We were working for really big companies, like billions of dollar companies, really big IPs. It's like stuff everyone's heard of. I think most of them are public now, but we did a lot of games in the top 100. And sometimes we would be privy to the little details because you go to lunch with the guy, dinner with the guys, and the executive dudes would always tell you about what the negotiation was like getting the IPs. So some of these IPs, even simple ones, like an IP like WWE, which once you leave America, no one even knows about this thing. Like you mean like grown men, they hit each other for fake, for fun, for real. Like no one knows. Like this is real. People do this. So wait, they get paid millions of dollars. Sign me up, man. So anyway, it still is a massive IP. And if it's big in America, it's big enough because America is part of the highest spending per user. They've got a huge population, it's 300 million plus. So the company that owned that IP, you ask them about the process and having the IP and stuff. Basically, it's totally arbitrary. They look at you, they just size you up. They're like, oh yeah, this guy looks like he can pay, or this guy doesn't look like we're going to make enough. So we're not even going to answer his phone calls or give him the other number. Once they do send it to you, they give you something like, hey, here's a contract that almost looks like we wrote this up yesterday while we were drunk and we don't care about you. It's something that's basically like, pay us $1 million now, and then you can start to create your own assets that match exactly the rules that I'm going to make up as you go. This guy's forehead's too big. This guy's arms aren't big enough. The crotch isn't loud as we want. You get the most random things sometimes. But on top of that, you got this, you paid the $1 million, then you're giving a kind of retainer. It's like $20,000 a month or 20% of your earnings, whichever one is higher. So before you've even made anything, like you just signed the paper, now you're already out of pocket a mil, and then now you have to prepare your art team. This is what we're doing. The director is briefing the guys. Then they're taking weeks and months to create each asset, animate each asset, make every UI. Like they're doing it from scratch. The only thing they got was the allowance to use those characters. And they're out of pocket every month. So if you're not well-funded, like proper well-funded, like you never even really needed to make the game, because each of these guys, like everyone in the games industry, they're pretty expensive. That's why our old company was attractive, because we would have really technically skilled people, but they're living in countries like Vietnam, where $1,000 a month, especially back then, go back 4 or 5 years, is a big difference to how it is now. But $1,000 a month, and the guy is like super happy, totally loyal to the company. Like he sees the company as like part of his family because they're taking care of him and all of his, like half his relatives, like his grandma lives with them and he's taking care of all of them. And they're just like a junior, which in Australia, you couldn't hire, you couldn't get like an apprentice or intern for $1,000 a month. People would look at you like, what's wrong with you? Give the guy some money, he's gonna starve. It's like, and it's not a little bit of money. So certain parts of the world, you can go to like South America or something, and you can really get these things. But on the other end of the scale, you've got people that are going to get paid a minimum of like 100K a year. So then you need a game team of like minimum 20, 30 people, all in America. You're maybe paying like $3-4 million a year just to produce the assets, let alone the rights to produce those assets might be an extra, 200, 300 grand a year until you make your thing. And they don't want to lose the opportunity. So they'll give you a strange contract. We allow you to use the IP, but only for film. It has to be on DVD. You can't go to cinemas. It's like random things like this. Or you can do it, but you can't do VHS tapes. We sold that to another dude. They'll tell you like, you can make it on Game Boy, but you can't make it on Xbox. Well, like something, you always have something. So we even had situations where it's like, I think I can give you the example now, but it was like the Monopoly IP, and they were saying like, oh hey, we're gonna use this. We got the rights for mobile, and we're like, oh sweet, you just Monopoly on mobile and you're done. Like everyone's gonna love that. And they said yes, but we unfortunately can't use dice and we can't use the board. Like we have the Monopoly guy. Like, such a strange who got this deal? Such a strange.
They sell the dice to
Monopoly guy. I can't remember exactly. I think it was like two big brands fighting for it, like Sony on one side and like another big game company like worth billions on the other side. And some of these guys, they're worth billions. Like one of the guys we used to work with, the company itself was worth I think like 2 billion, and they're about to make another game, and they do a raise, and they get like another 300 mil. It's like, dude, you're already rich. What are you doing? But it's just to cover the costs and the potential kind of waste of money. You never know, some of the graveyard pieces that these companies make, they could actually be building a game for 3 or 4 years in the background. And a lot of this is done just with IP and asset production. So we're hoping to kind of weasel our way into that niche of games becoming big, but despite the fact that we've got so many indie devs in the world, because of development is becoming easier because there's all of these kind of packages or boilerplate code, templates, and lots of things that help you code a game or develop the systems. But then you get to the slow production side, which is usually the asset production, and being able to access an IP just to do all of the concepting and design stuff is already a shortcut. You also do a bit of a shortcut when you go out into the marketing stage and you already have a positive association because millions of people have already seen that brand and interacted with that brand. So there's a lot of advantages, and that's why, despite being so difficult to deal with and so difficult to do successfully, people still try. And even though it's so expensive, like all of the incentives are wrong, but it still manages to become a valuable endeavor. And we're trying to kind of fit something into the same place. So our stuff now, they get the IP with zero friction. It's like less than zero friction. It's like, we'll even help you. So it's like we oil up the ground before they just slide in. And we've got game ready assets, full developed IP, and a growing community. We're only small, but we're growing.
So we've talked a lot, this is your kind of like DAO vision and how this ties into this. You're talking so much about game development. So I guess, how are you using all of your game development chops, and like, what are your game development aspirations with Hatchy Pocket, away from just the rights issue? Like, I guess, what games are you building?
Yeah, man. Games are my passion, and I was an indie dev for a long time. I spent nearly 8 years or 9 years. It was going on to 10 before I started working in a company. I thought I'll refine my craft and make epic games. My dream always is to have my own top games, because it's always been my ambition. Part of that process is kind of developing the resource pool needed to make those games. At the moment, we're working on a couple. We're a little bit reserved in showing them off, but there's reasons for that. We don't like to disappoint people, and at the same time, surprise and delight, they're parts of the things that make things fun and exciting. So we'd like to surprise people when we get there. Though we also see like all of the support at the moment that we get kind of helps to establish those and to build them out. So we do try to show just enough every now and then. We've got a couple projects that we're working on now, which I hesitate to say because it's not the best thing to do, but it makes sense for us. We have experience in production as well, so we can do a little bit of the juggling in a way that makes sense. It's not super nonsensical. It's not like a light diluted focus. So at the moment, we have 2 threads in our production studio. We actually have a pretty decent sized production studio. We're about 30 people. We have 2 big threads in the production studio. On one side, we just focus on the development of the assets. So everything from more monsters for Gen 2 to making the Gen 1 monsters game ready assets. So making a design into a game ready asset is basically like concept drawing, sculpting, remodeling. So they're smaller and they'll render in the engine smoothly, texturing, rigging, animation. So all of these things might take behind the scenes from, it's like a very solid week per monster basically. So the 40 monsters that we've currently got, and that's for a skilled team, it's like a skilled team of, let's say, at least 4 people, because they all take on, one does modeling, one does UVs and texturing. Anyway, it's like a very solid week for a production studio. You're looking at roughly like a week to develop that. So one team is just making these 2D and 3D models, and they're ready to go into any game engine. And then us on another side, we're taking those as a proof of concept. We've got a very ambitious game, which is actually an MMO, which we see as the kind of, it's like the epitome. It's like the highest point you can get to for a game, and especially in terms of economy, in terms of kind of like the broadness of potential experiences and stuff. So it's also the craziest thing you can do, because we're building a proper world. So it's so ambitious actually that among game devs, it's a joke. You don't usually say you're building an MMO unless you want to, like, unless you're joking or you want to get laughed out of the room. It's just one of those game dev things that everyone wants to do, but it's like saying to your mate, hey, I know where the Holy Grail is. Me and a few friends are going to go find it. It's like, you just don't do that. Maybe you do it in secret. You say you're going on holiday. But that's kind of what we're doing. We're working on the MMO, but we're kind of doing it quietly. And as we get there, we're trying to use these assets in other meaningful ways. So we're actually building a mini game right now, 2 mini games. One of them is just you and your mobile phone versus your high score. And the other one is you and a friend challenging another guy and trying to shoot them off a small platform. They're fun little games. They're like more like little toys that you can play with. And it's our way of trying to build and promote the brand, and also kind of show that you can like really significantly reduce your production time by using these assets and focus on what makes a game fun as opposed to what makes it look good. And slowly each game is working its own thread of building the positive associations with the brand and the familiarity with the brand, and also kind of showing on another side that, hey, these things can be used and make a meaningful experience that is taken in well. You know? There's a few advantages that we get as game devs. Like it's a really massive thing to release something and on the first day get 2,000 downloads that actually play the game. And on having the chain side, having the chain community when you release a game and having access to that community totally helps you in that organic promotion that is normally difficult for anyone that isn't a well-marketed or decent sized brand. So yeah, we're juggling a little bit at the moment, and we don't want our own games to be the biggest focus because there's that little separation. So there's the decentralized IP itself, and then there's us as a private entity using that IP and those resources with the intention to actually pay a tax. It's a very small tax. It's one of those things where like we've tested this over and over again and we're open to changing it. The DAO can change it at any time. But basically the rules of engagement with our brand is it's a 0% tax, full access to the assets, the community, even some code that kind of connects you to the chain and stuff. We do everything from design assistance to economy assistance, like game design or economy design. And our team is there to help. Or publicly, you can get a bit of help as well. And it's zero cost upfront. Only after 300,000 USD profits, we take a 10% tax on profits. That doesn't go to me. It goes directly to the DAO. It's like it's directly a DAO thing. So the ownership is really obvious that we don't actually own the brand. We're just users of that brand. So if we have any success, It's a success that anybody can replicate by themselves at any time. Like they just go there, they download our assets, and they've got complete access to that. Going on to what you were saying before about shrimp actually have a massive potential in the market. There's a few reasons, you know. They need so little to sustain that on the other side, like the whales, they need so much to sustain. So those big companies, there's a bit of testament to the story I was saying before. Like even though they have billions in the bank, before they make some of these games, they do a raise and they get, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars because of a few reasons. One, they are probably going to spend it doing different things, maybe on marketing on top of everything. The most they'll do marketing, but then they're too big to fail. They can't take risks that could even suggest for a small moment in the future that there's a potential of failure. So they usually do things that are tried and tested. They don't go into like, oh, I wonder if the edge of the world is here. They don't do that kind of stuff. They do like, oh, Bob went there, he came back, he's been doing this a few times. He looks like he makes a X% profit each time. Now let's send a whole bunch of ships and do Bob's run. So you see situations like Warcraft 3 was a very big one when I was young. Warcraft 3, a game by Blizzard in Blizzard's heyday, they released basically a world editor. And in that world editor, the logic was there where you could place a guy and make some rules, you know, wait for a guy to get a 50% health and then change him into this guy. So like you could do that kind of stuff. But then what really powered that up was they had this massive pool of resources. So you had all of these high fantasy models, elves and orcs and dudes with axes, guys riding griffins. And it was essentially like a very strongly themed world, but then a blank canvas, do whatever you want. Out of these blank canvases, just the ability to kind of put a few of these logic bricks together and assets, like a massive pool of assets that you could utilize, people created completely new genres. The tower defense was turned into like a global kind of gaming force. Then the genre of tower defense really came out. Dota, the MOBA, that online is like one of the biggest esport games now. This all started in a Warcraft 3 custom map. And in the same way, Fortnite, which is one of the biggest games now, actually cloned a mod of DayZ, which was PUBG. And then once everyone saw that this PUBG game was doing well, but if only they fixed the graphics a little bit, if only it wasn't so buggy. And then you have a massive company like Epic. They come and they're like, okay, our next biggest investment is cloning this game made by a shrimp, you know? And the shrimp like that, because they can take the risk, because they take so little to sustain themselves, and they look for those crazy opportunities and they take advantage of the most ridiculous things where like you think like no one's ever done this, it can't work, and then the shrimp's like, challenge accepted. It kind of gives you a little bit more of a possibility. So we're hoping that by tackling this kind of resource layer and making it so available, we give ourselves the chance to not only create, but then to take advantage of the success of something like a MOBA creation or a PUBG kind of battle, I forget what they're called, but like that deathmatch battle royale thing. If we create a genre, it'll feed the brand will grow the community. There's like a circular dependency, and that'll attract more people. And there's a growing pool right now of game developers in the world that just need assets. But even a $20 asset is too much for some people. Like some people, $20, like they don't make that in a week. You know what I mean? It's the reason why we chose Avalanche, because we're looking at some stuff and they're like, oh, there's only like a $5 transaction fee. And I'll be like, that's like billions of people that can't afford that. You know, it's like, but yeah. Like
so I'm really impressed by, you know, how big you guys are. I had no idea that you were that many people, and it seems that like you really have an expansive vision, and you're maybe a little bit the stereotype of NFT project has a roadmap. You know, like, you know, there really is a lot there. But I kind of have one more topic that I wanted to touch on, which, I keep hearing these whispers about Winternet and maybe a subnet. And I'm just kind of curious what that's all about. And just if you could give us a little tease.
Yeah, right on. I mean, I guess it first starts off with one of our expressions. So we've got something like the MMO expression of using the IP. And I know a lot of people that are specifically gamers first, like gamers before crypto. They don't get the whole metaverse thing. And I think this is why there's people that don't like the idea of a metaverse, because it's very superficial and it's very hyped. And when something's super hyped and superficial, it kind of polarizes, you know. For me, as a gamer first, when I look at most metaverses, I think to myself, this is worse than an MMO that I used to play like on browser 12 years ago, you know, or longer than that, because I'm pretty old now. But like when I was 12 years old, I used to play games like RuneScape or like Guild Wars or Ragnarok Online, or I think World of Warcraft was only a few years after that. And these games were proper, almost what we want to believe is a metaverse now, but it was a very immersive experience. It was a whole new universe to explore. There was a lot of things that you couldn't do. You could do something like you could trade your mate. You know, your friend could go online and you could say, hey, I'll punch this guy first while he's attacking me. You can level up. And you got all of these random opportunities for different experiences. But ultimately, there were massive economies and they were really immersive experiences. It felt very connected. They were compartmentalized into servers. They were compartmentalized into games. But if you were smart, you could supersede that. For example, hey, I'll trade you my Pokemon card for your sword. Does that make a metaverse? Because I've attached, I've traded my asset from a completely different world into this new thing. I guess like the meta there, or the main, I guess like physics, is just the real world and your ability to communicate and stuff, which is not so far from our current expressions of metaverse, which is like, hey, this guy has an NFT, he's making a game, and if you don't like his game, you can sell your NFT to someone else. Metaverse. But it's kind of superficial. Then people could say things like, hey, you have this asset, the database is on the chain, so you're carrying around your asset into all of these different things. So you're going to a different game and your NFT is in your inventory, but it's not really useful. It's just like it's in your inventory. For it to be useful, there's all of this extra connection. Some people, they play a game and they go, oh, why didn't they just make this checkbox? Why didn't they add orcs? They just needed to make a checkbox and you have an orc. But I mean, you need so much more than just like a Boolean. True or false, does orc exist? It's like, yes, orc exists. Now you've defined that orc exists. You've got an empty box. You have to fill it with orcs look like this. They animate like this. This is their texture. This is how a hat fits on, like all the little details. So in the same way, they have it in the inventory, but without defining all of those little details, you don't have it as an experience. It's just like it's superficially there. It's there in spirit, It's like the party you didn't go to. What we would like to see as a gamer first, what I'd like to see is like, I've taken my sword from game 1 and game 2 recognizes my sword. But I mean, for you to be able to do that, you need a top layer that essentially holds all of the information of the example before of what the orc looks like, what the hat looks like on that orc and stuff. So we need a top layer that says, my sword exists in game A. It has this kind of look to it. It has this kind of skills and stuff. And there's a lot of problems. Like game B, 1, your style might not fit. 2, your sword might be too powerful to just read in directly. It's like it breaks their game and stuff. So there's so much layer of difficulty that needs to be addressed before you can have the current kind of community perspective or ambition of what a metaverse should be. We believe that the only true way to do it is to essentially create this top layer. So Winternet was a kind of infrastructure play that we were doing. As not only Hatchy Pocket, actually, as Hatchy Pocket, we were working with some of the early guys on Avalanche, and we connected directly with the Crypto Seals guys. And hey, Baba, my daughter wants to say hello.
Your daughter, my
so
cat.
we can, yeah, I heard him meowing in the back. So we've actually connected with the Crypto Seals guys, and we've been working with them. We initially wanted to connect both their world and ours, and we're ultimately trying to make a kind of universe where all of the games have some layer of connection, and that's where Winternet came in. We're still a little bit, it's relatively quietly done because we're not 100% certain if we'll do it or not. There's a significant cost that comes with developing a subnet and stuff. And we've got a relatively decent sized community. Most of them are technical, and we have a lot of people that are willing to take on validator nodes and stuff. But we're seeing how we go ahead with that. So it's kind of like a maybe, maybe not. We might even end up on Swimmer network, but ultimately what the idea was is to have basically a top layer that both stores all of this info and is something that you can tap into. It's backed up with us by also having an open IP and open asset repository, because once that asset wants to leave one experience and become kind of meaningful in another one, you need to fill that void. And our easiest way to fill that void is to use all those assets. A lot of people don't realize this, but actually you would most likely get sued if you use even an NFT from a different project if that project doesn't want to be part of your experience. They could cease and desist you, or they could sue you. It could be, it's one of those, it goes back into the arbitrary layer, is the social layer, like social governance, where a guy could say, this is my IP, I don't like the way you're using it. Like, for example, it could be anything, but let's say you use, like, you go to Yuga Labs and you make your own 3D assets of their monkeys, but then even if it's a great experience, if you're going against their own iteration, you're going against, I think it's called Otherworld or something. If you're going against the Otherworld kind of market, they could pull the plug on you at any time. There was a famous example with the Harry Potter lady, J.K. Rowling. She would apparently use, they had this like Harry Potter wiki. It was a community-made resource, it's totally community-made. They found like the deepest info on the most esoteric characters and put it all in one place. So much so that J.K. Rowling herself said, this is such a great resource, I use it to fact check myself before I release a book. Like, even she's using it. But then the Harry Potter company turned around and said, hey, this is a good resource. This is a product. Why aren't we selling this? And I think around the same time, the guys were considering themselves, they put so much effort into it. It's like, hey, aren't you the guys that made this encyclopedia? They're like famous for it. Oh yeah, we made the Harry Potter encyclopedia. It's like, yeah, but do you have any money? Like, no, not really, because we didn't sell anything. And they're like, why don't you make a book that people can buy off you? Harry Potter company says, no, I'd like to do that, please. So they cease and desist the wiki. Like, you're not allowed to do this anymore. And then they release their own product like a month later. So it's like, I wonder where that came in, you know? But yeah, anyone could do this at any time. So we're hoping that, coupled with this kind of fantastic idea of moving assets between experiences, we've also got the really reinforcing side to that, which is, here's a full access to all of our assets. Here's a full access to essentially our other game experiences. And Winternet also was actually, it's being designed now to have a kind of accounts layer. So we have a couple different places where you could tie your assets in to another game. One of them was just meant to be like, you've achieved a certain achievement on this game, like getting to level 100. Now you get a special car in this other game, or you have a sword in this game, will allow you to access a boss in this other game. So you could kind of arbitrage your experiences and give a little bit extra value to some of your assets, since one guy might like to do something that you don't like to do. So we're hoping to do some stuff that kind of pushes the ideas of innovation in the metaverse, but we'll see how far we get, because we're really focused on making sure that like Hatchy Pocket, which is our most public project, and actually Crypto Seals as well, because those guys have helped us a lot with the idea that we'd be doing Winternet as a big thing later on. So right now, our biggest focus is actually a fully immutable blockchain game that's coming out from the Crypto Seals guys called Summoners, and a couple of our Hatchy Pocket games, as well as the promoting of the IP and stuff. We've got a lot of little things. So we're trying to, I guess, finish some stuff off and redirect our focus and stuff.
Well, I hope you get to build it, because it's something that I would certainly like to see in the world. All right, so I think we should transition. So I think this is going live. So I hope everybody who sees this got to enjoy New York and the Avalanche event there. I think I might actually be making a cameo appearance after all. So hopefully I got to see some of you guys there. And I know that we're going to be having a bunch of in-person events pop up soon. There's one, I'm not sure if I can actually announce it yet or not, so I'm not going to, but I know we're going to have a presence at a conference very soon, internationally, in a part of the world that we have never been to before. So really looking forward to meeting some newer parts of the Avalanche community. So Gabriel, do you have anything that you want to add or touch on this week?
You know, this has been such an interesting conversation. I actually do have 3 or 4 questions, but I feel like they'll be so long-winded, and I know we have crossed an hour now, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm going to hold off on asking them, but wow, man, you have really, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you guys are onto something very big. I would encourage you to pursue the Winternet idea. Everything you said there resonated with me about the, the need for this top layer in order to be the common thread which runs through all the games, that makes the sword that's in your inventory not be OP in this extra game, or make sense in this, game. And you really just, I can't say it any better than you just did, so I won't even attempt to, but you're onto something big, man. Your intuition is absolutely correct there. So, of course, I would encourage you to pursue that idea. Even if you do end up on SwimmerNet, I suspect that something like this will emerge organically on SwimmerNet, simply because what you're saying is the right idea, and the right idea at the right time usually wins. And you can't really fight the right idea. You can only hope to be on the same side as it. I do think it's sort of interesting that you're landing on this idea of intellectual property. And one thing that it reminded me of is Richard Stallman. You guys may know Richard Stallman as the famous hacker who created the Free Software Foundation, and he created GNU, which is, sort of the core component of Linux. And there's the GPL, the GNU Public License. And I always thought it was interesting that Richard Stallman, who was, famously one of the best hackers in the world. In fact, he might have even coined the phrase hacker. I know he was around MIT in the 50s when they came up with the word hacker, but, he's one of the traditional archetypical hackers. And really, he's sort of in the second, or the second half of his career or so, really moved away from writing code per se. I'm sure he still writes a ton of code and does a lot of it in the day-to-day, but really what he is he's like a legal scholar. He created the GNU Public License, and anytime you go see a presentation from Richard Stallman, if you go right now and just Google his most recent presentations, they all have to do with intellectual property and law. Very rarely do you hear him talk about software at all. And so I think it's very interesting that you guys are sort of coming to the same awareness that it's not just enough to have the technical chops. Now there's this whole idea of, licensing, and how are you going to license all of these individual components that make it where they can be used universally, but then there's still some type of a business angle to it. So yeah, this is a very eye-opening conversation. I'm really glad we got you on board, man. This was super awesome. So congratulations on all your success. I think you're going to see much more of it going forward. We'll extend the invitation to you to come back anytime. If if any of your projects come into focus and you want to plug them to the community, please just reach out to us and let us know. You're welcome back anytime. So if people wanted to find you online, how would they find you?
We're pretty much chained to the desk, even though we're quiet. I try to make sure that we're always up to date with our Twitter DMs, but the best place always is actually our Discord. You'll always find me on Discord. I'm very approachable, so everyone's always welcome to shoot me a message.
Do you guys have a server, a Discord server?
Yeah, it's it should just be discord.gg/Hatchy Pocket.
Yeah, I think it's at the bottom of the website actually. So if you guys go to the website, there's a little icon at the very bottom. I think you guys can see it. Yeah. So if you guys go to the bottom of their screen, you can see it now. I'm sharing it. There's a little Discord icon. So I think they can probably find you.
Yeah.
There.
We'll put a
Twitter's the
link
best
in
place
the
to get us.
description.
Those two, Twitter and Discord, the best.
There it
But if
is.
they want to message me or they want to get through to anyone on the team, the best place is our Discord.
Yeah, and as Connor just said, we'll share the links in the YouTube description as well. Okay, thank you very much, man. Awesome. Connor, last minute thoughts?
No, I think, yeah, I'm good. But yeah, if you're interested in following me, you can always find me on Twitter. I'm DOS_Connor.
All right, cool. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll follow you guys on Twitter.
awesome. So yeah, if you
Yeah,
guys
It's a
already.
pleasure, man. Honestly. Thanks for having me on, bro.
Yeah, of
Appreciate
course. Absolutely. So yeah, anybody out there, if you want to follow me, I'm CG Cardona on Twitter, CGCARDONA. As Connor said, when this goes live, we'll already be past this weekend. We're recording this now, of course, on Thursday, but this weekend, I think might even be going on now, but over the weekend is the Avalanche House in New York. So obviously, if you're seeing this, that's already happened, but hopefully you had a great time. Hopefully you get to connect with Connor. He will be out there. So yeah, just thanks to everybody as always. I always express gratitude and I always mean it. So thanks to everybody who's been part of the journey. We will be back next week. We have a super huge guest who we've tried to get on twice now, and I think we've had to bump around schedules. Finally, everything is coming into focus. So we have a very exciting guest next week. I'll be on the road. I'll actually be in Kentucky. So I'll be coming to you from my hometown next week. But yeah, I think we'll just sign it off. So as we always say, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you, everybody. Peace.